The stars above Earth had never seemed so threatening. Commander Dane stood at the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the scanner display with hands clenched behind his back. 300 red dots filled the screen, each representing a Kryvax dreadnought. Each ship was 5 times larger than anything humanity had ever built. The alien fleet hung in space like a swarm of metal predators, waiting. Dayan had served in Earth's Stellar Defense Command for 20 years. He had seen pirates, smugglers, and small conflicts between colony settlements. Nothing had prepared him for this. The Kryvax Dominion ruled 400 worlds across the galaxy. Their empire had crushed 19 civilizations before reaching Earth. Now they wanted humanity to surrender. The communication came 3 hours ago. Supreme Legate Vorn, commander of the Kryvax fleet, appeared on every screen across Earth and her colonies. His scaled face filled the displays, reptilian eyes cold and calculating. The translation software made his voice sound mechanical and flat. Humans of Earth, your world now belongs to the Kryvax Dominion. You have 72 hours to surrender all military forces and submit to our rule. Resist, and we will burn your cities to ash. Your ships are pathetic. Your weapons are toys. Accept your fate or face extinction. The message ended with footage from their previous conquests. Burning cities, fleeing populations, destroyed fleets. 19 civilizations had tried to fight. 19 civilizations had failed. The Galactic Council, a union of peaceful species that Earth had recently joined, had already abandoned humanity. They voted to recognize Kryvax control over the Sol system. Fighting was pointless, they said. Better to surrender and live as subjects than die as heroes. Dahan turned away from the observation deck and walked through Luna Station's corridors. Crew members rushed past him, faces pale with fear. Some were packing personal belongings. Others sat in corners, crying quietly. The station's commander had already ordered evacuation procedures. Civilian transports were being loaded with families, heading for the outer colonies. Maybe some would escape. Maybe. He entered the war room where Admiral Myre was arguing with a holographic projection of Earth's civilian government. Politicians shouted at her, demanding she order the fleet to stand down. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to surrender immediately and hope for mercy. We have 12 frigates. One politician screamed. 12. They have 300 dreadnoughts. This isn't war. It's suicide. Admiral Myre was a small woman, barely reaching Dayan's shoulder, but her presence filled the room. Gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, uniform perfectly pressed despite 3 sleepless days. She had commanded Earth's defense forces for a decade. Her voice was calm, cold as ice. Surrender, and we live as slaves. Our children, their children, everyone for generations will serve the Kryvax. Is that what you want? Better slaves than dead. Another politician shouted. Myra. He slammed her hand on the table. The holographic projection flickered. I have not finished. We have one option left. One ship. The room fell silent. Dahan stepped forward, confused. One ship? What could one ship do against an armada? Myra touched her command tablet. A new holographic image appeared, showing a sleek warship unlike anything Dayan had seen. It was smaller than Earth's frigates, angular, and covered in strange geometric patterns. This is the S Indomitable. We built it in secret over 15 years in the asteroid belt. The project consumed resources we claimed were for mining operations. One experimental ship? A politician laughed bitterly. That's your solution? The Indomitable doesn't fight like other ships. It uses technology the Kryvax have never encountered. And it has the best tactical mind in our fleet as captain. Myra pulled up another image. A man in his late 30s, stern face with a scar running down his left cheek. Captain Junho. Daehan knew that name. Everyone in the military knew it. Junho was brilliant, winning simulations no one else could solve, seeing patterns in chaos. He was also unstable, court-martialed twice for ignoring orders and endangering his crew with reckless maneuvers. You want to bet Earth's survival on a madman in an untested ship? A politician demanded. I want to bet on someone who refuses to accept defeat, Myray replied. The Indomitable launches in 6 hours. If it fails, we can still surrender. But I will not give up without trying. The politicians argued for another hour, but Myray ignored them. She had already made her decision. Daehan followed her out of the war room into her private office. She poured 2 glasses of whiskey, something she never did on duty. That told him everything about how desperate their situation was. Do you really think this ship can work? Daehan asked. Myray stared at her glass. I think Captain Junho and his crew are about to attempt something impossible. And I think if anyone can pull off a miracle, it's him. But Daehan, even if they succeed, the cost will be terrible. She showed him classified files about the Indomitable. The ship's weapon wasn't a missile or energy beam. It bent space itself, creating gravitational fields that could crush ships like paper. But the technology was unstable. Every use brought the risk of catastrophic failure. The ship might destroy itself along with the enemy. The crew volunteered, Myray said quietly. 200 people who knew they might not come home. Junho asked for volunteers only. He refused to take anyone who had children. Daehan felt his stomach tighten. 200 volunteers against an empire. It seemed insane. But what choice did they have? He looked at the scanner feeds again. The Kryvax fleet was moving into attack formation. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Somewhere in the asteroid belt, the Indomitable was powering up its engines. Captain Junho and his crew were preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of Earth. Daehan raised his glass in a silent toast. He didn't know if he was saluting heroes or mourning the dead. The asteroid 433 Eros hung in the darkness like a massive potato-shaped rock, rotating slowly through the belt. On its shadow side, hidden from long-range scanners, the ESS Indomitable waited. The ship's hull was dark gray, almost black, covered in panels that absorbed radar and light. It had been built here over 15 years, assembled in secret by workers who thought they were constructing mining equipment. Captain Junho sat in the command chair, reading the activation orders for the 3rd time. His crew of 200 moved through the ship with practiced efficiency, preparing systems that had never been tested in real combat. The bridge was smaller than a standard frigate, cramped with equipment and displays. Everything was designed for function, not comfort. Lieutenant Hai-Jin stood beside his chair, arms crossed. She was tall, athletic, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served with Junho for 8 years, following him through 2 courts, martial and eventual reinstatement. Now she questioned him again. Sir, I need to say this one more time. We're one ship. They have 300. Even with our technology, the math doesn't work. Junho looked up from the orders. The scar on his cheek was a reminder of his first command when pirates had boarded his ship. He fought them hand-to-hand in the corridor, nearly died, but saved his crew. The math never works, Hai-Jin. We're always outgunned. The question is whether we're smart enough to make it not matter. Chief Engineer Tai-Jin's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, I need you in the engine room. Now. Junho and Hai-Jin made their way through the narrow corridors. Crew members pressed against the walls to let them pass. Everyone looked tense. They all knew what was coming. In the engine room, Tai-Jin stood before a massive spherical chamber that glowed with blue light. The Cascade Drive, humanity's secret weapon. Tai-Jin was older than most of the crew, 50 years old with gray streaking his black hair. He had designed this engine, spent 10 years of his life making it work. I wanted you to see it active before we enter combat. This is what we've been building. The sphere pulsed with light, beautiful and terrifying. Junho could feel it in his bones, a vibration that seemed wrong, like reality itself was humming off key. Explain it again. Simple terms. The Kryvax have shields that can stop any projectile, any energy beam. They're basically unbeatable with conventional weapons. But shields work by deflecting matter and energy. They can't deflect space itself. Taijin touched the controls, and the sphere's glow intensified. The cascade drive creates localized gravitational anomalies. We bend space-time around enemy ships, crush them with gravity, or tear them apart with competing fields. Weapons officer Jiwoo entered the engine room, carrying a tactical pad. She was young, barely 25, but had graduated top of her class in weapons systems. I've been running combat simulations. If we can get close enough to their fleet, we can take out multiple ships with each pulse. But we need to be inside their formation, which means flying into the middle of 300 dreadnoughts, Haijin said. That's suicide. It's tactics, Junho corrected. They don't know what we can do. They'll see us as one small ship, not a threat. By the time they realize what's happening, we'll already be among them. Dr. Suyan arrived, the science team leader who had developed tactical applications for the Cascade Drive. She was brilliant. 3 PhDs in physics, but looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes showed weeks of sleepless preparation. Captain, I need to warn you about the drive's limitations. Each pulse generates enormous heat. We can fire maybe 10 times before the system overheats. After that, the containment field will fail. What happens then? Junho asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Catastrophic failure. The gravitational field collapses inward. The ship and everything within several thousand kilometers gets pulled into a temporary singularity. Total destruction. The engine room fell silent. 10 shots. That was all they had. And if they used all 10, they would die. Junho studied the faces of his senior officers. Haijin looked grim but determined. Taijin seemed almost at peace, ready to see his life's work used. Jiwoo was pale but her jaw was set. Sion just looked tired. Tell the crew, Junho said. No secrets. They deserve to know the truth. Over the next hour, the crew assembled in the ship's small mess hall in groups. Junho explained the mission, the weapon, and the risks. Some crew members cried. Others prayed. A few looked angry, like they had been betrayed. But when he asked if anyone wanted to take an escape pod and leave, not a single person moved. Navigator Minho, a quiet man who rarely spoke, raised his hand. Sir, if we're going to die anyway, let's make it count. I can plot trajectories that will put us exactly where we need to be. The Kryvax won't expect us to move the way we can move. Medical Officer Yuna stood up. She was the oldest crew member at 55, a veteran of every conflict Earth had fought. I'll prepare medical bay for casualties, and I'll make sure anyone who's hurt doesn't suffer at the end. Junho felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, maybe, or grief. These people had volunteered knowing they might not return. Now they knew they almost certainly wouldn't. And still, they stayed. The countdown reached 40 hours. Earth's defenses were being evacuated. The Kryvax fleet was moving into position around the planet. Supreme Legate Vorn was broadcasting threats, demanding immediate surrender. Admiral Myre sent one final message to the Indomitable. Give them hell. Junho sat in the command chair and gave the order. Minho, take us out. Set course for Earth. Taijin, bring the Cascade Drive to standby power. Jiwoo, load targeting solutions. Haijin, broadcast old distress signals, make us look like a cargo runner fleeing the system. The Indomitable's engines flared to life. The ship pulled away from the asteroid's shadow and accelerated toward Earth. On long-range sensors, it appeared as a single weak contact. A cargo vessel, perhaps? A refugee ship. Nothing important. JUNHO watched the scanner display as the Kravax fleet grew closer. 300 red dots, arranged in attack formation around Earth. Somewhere in the center was Vorn's flagship, 3 times larger than the other dreadnoughts. That was their target. Cut off the head, and the body would fall. All crew to battle stations, Junho announced. This is it. For Earth. The response came from 200 voices throughout the ship. For Earth. The S Indomitable flew into the darkness, one small ship against an empire. Behind them, the asteroid belt slowly rotated. Ahead, the battle that would determine humanity's future waited. The first missiles struck Earth's orbital stations at exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum. Admiral Myray watched from Luna Station as fire bloomed in the darkness. The Kravax didn't bother with warnings or last chances. Supreme Legate Vorn wanted to make an example of humanity. The frigate SS Defiance died first, shields collapsing under sustained bombardment. 30 seconds later, the ESS Courage followed, split in half by a particle beam. The remaining 10 frigates scattered, trying to buy time for evacuation shuttles. They lasted 8 minutes. 8 minutes before Earth's entire defensive fleet was reduced to burning debris. All ships, fall back to Luna's shadow, Myray ordered, her voice steady despite the horror unfolding on the screens. Get the civilians out. That's priority 1 now. On Earth's surface, billions watched the sky turn to fire. The Kravax began orbital bombardment of military installations. Defense satellites exploded like fireworks. Space stations crumbled. In the cities, people ran for shelters, clutching children and crying. Some prayed. Some cursed. Many simply stood frozen, watching their world end. Aboard the S Indomitable, Captain Junho counted down the distance to the Kravax fleet. 300,000 kilometers. 200,000. 100,000. The ship flew straight toward the Armada, still broadcasting distress signals, pretending to be a fleeing cargo vessel. They're scanning us, Lieutenant Hai-Jin reported from her station. Active targeting lock from 3 dreadnoughts. Let them look, Junho said calmly. What do they see, Jiwoo? Weapons Officer Jiwoo checked her displays. Weak power signature, minimal weapons, outdated engines. They're classifying us as non-threatening. 1 dreadnought is moving to intercept, probably to capture us for questioning. Perfect. Minho, adjust course. Make it look like we're trying to avoid them, but failing. I want to pass within 10 kilometers of that ship. Navigator Minho's fingers danced across his controls. The Indomitable changed direction, engines sputtering as if damaged. The pursuing Kravax dreadnought altered course to match, moving to cut them off. It was exactly what Junho wanted. 50,000 kilometers. 40,000. The Kravax fleet was massive, ships arranged in concentric rings around Earth. Vorn's flagship sat at the center, a monster of metal and weapons 4 kilometers long. The formation was designed for maximum firepower coverage, every angle protected. But it also meant the ships were close together, clustered in groups. We're inside their formation, Hai-Jin announced. 20 dreadnoughts within 50 kilometers. 60 more within 100. Supreme Legate Vorn sat on his command throne aboard the flagship, watching displays that showed Earth's pitiful resistance crumbling. 19 civilizations had failed before the humans. Number 20 would fall just as easily. His tactical officer pointed to a scanner contact. Supreme Legate, 1 small vessel approaching our position. Analysis suggests it's a cargo ship trying to flee. Vorn barely glanced at it. Destroy it. No, wait. Capture it. I want prisoners to interrogate. Let them tell us where their leaders are hiding. The dreadnought moved to intercept, extending boarding clamps. The human ship was so small, so pathetic. This would be over in moments. Now, Junho said quietly. Chief Engineer Taijin activated the cascade drive. The blue sphere in the engine room pulsed. And reality bent out. The gravitational wave expanded outward from the Indomitable, like an invisible hammer. Space-time warped, twisted, compressed. The Kryvax dreadnought that had been moving to capture them suddenly crumpled like a tin can crushed by a giant fist. Its shields flickered uselessly, designed to stop matter and energy, not the warping of space itself. The ship's hull folded inward. Bulkheads collapsed. Crew members were crushed instantly as local gravity spiked to impossible levels. The dreadnought exploded, a fireball that lit up the darkness. Target destroyed. Jiwoo shouted. Recharging for next pulse. 20 seconds. Vorn lurched forward in his throne. What? What just happened? His tactical officer scrambled to analyze the data. The human ship, I don't understand the readings. It generated a massive gravitational anomaly. Space itself warped around our dreadnought. One ship did that? Impossible. All vessels, focus fire on that ship. Destroy it now. But the Indomitable was already moving. Minho had plotted a course that took them through the densest part of the formation, weaving between dreadnoughts like a fighter craft. The Kryvax opened fire, particle beams and missiles filling the space where the human ship had been milliseconds ago. They hit their own ships instead, friendly fire causing chaos. Second pulse ready, Taijin announced. Fire. Junho ordered. Another gravitational wave pulsed outward. This time, it caught 5 Kryvax ships in a cluster formation. The gravity field didn't crush them, instead creating competing gravitational pulls that tore them in different directions. Hull plating ripped away. Ships collided with each other at tremendous speed, becoming twisted wrecks of metal. The Kryvax formation dissolved into chaos. Ships tried to scatter, but they were too close together, moving too slowly. The Indomitable darted through gaps, too small and fast to target effectively. Every 20 seconds, another pulse. Another group of dreadnoughts destroyed. 6 ships. 7. 8. Hull breach on deck 3. Haijin called out. A particle beam got through. 17 crew members dead, sealing the section. Junho gritted his teeth. The Kryvax were learning, predicting their movements, saturating entire areas with weapons fire. They couldn't dodge everything forever. Taijin, how many more pulses? 2, maybe 3 before catastrophic overload. The containment field is degrading faster than projected. 3 more shots. Junho looked at the tactical display. They had destroyed or crippled 78 dreadnoughts, but over 200 remained. Vorn's flagship was still intact, still coordinating the enemy fleet. On Earth, people watched the impossible battle unfold on every screen. One human ship against an empire, fighting in the darkness above their world. The Indomitable's hull was scarred and burning, but it kept moving, kept fighting. Fathers held their children and wept. Mothers prayed to gods they had stopped believing in. Strangers embraced in the streets. Admiral Myray stood at Luna Station, hands pressed against the observation window. She had sent these people to die. 200 crew members who volunteered to buy Earth a chance. And they were doing it. Against all odds, they were actually doing it. Come on, she whispered. Come on, Juno. Show them what we're made of. Aboard the Indomitable, alarms screamed. Another hull breach, this time on deck 5. 23 more crew members lost. The ship shuddered as a missile detonated against the port side. Fire spread through corridors. Damage control teams rushed to contain them. Dr. Cyan's voice came over the intercom, strained and urgent. Captain, the cascade drive is critical. One more pulse, maybe two. After that, total failure. The containment field will collapse and will go up like a supernova. Junho looked at his crew. Haijin, blood trickling down her face from a cut on her forehead. Jiwoo, frantically calculating targeting solutions. Minho, hands steady on the navigation controls, despite the ship shaking apart around them. One more shot won't be enough, he said quietly. We need to make it count. He pulled up the tactical display, studying Vorn's flagship. It sat at the center of the remaining formation, surrounded by protective dreadnoughts. If they could reach it, if they could deliver the cascade drive directly to the enemy command ship and detonate it at point-blank range, the explosion would destroy everything within 10,000 kilometers, including them. Plot a course for the flagship, Junho ordered. Collision course. Maximum speed. Navigator Minho stared at his display, at the course Captain Junho had just ordered. A direct line to Supreme Legend Vorn's flagship, straight through the heart of the remaining Kravax fleet. No evasive maneuvers. No clever tactics. Just a collision course at maximum thrust. Sir, Minho said slowly, if we do this, the escape pods won't get clear of the blast radius. The cascade drive detonation will destroy everything within 10,000 kilometers. I know, Junho replied. Lieutenant Haijin pulled Junho aside, away from the bridge crew. Blood still dripped from the cut on her forehead, mixing with sweat and grime. Her uniform was torn from the hull breach explosions. She looked at her captain with eyes that had seen 8 years of combat together. This is different from your usual crazy plans, she said quietly. This isn't risking our lives. This is ending them. All of us. Double quotes. Junho met her gaze. What choice do we have? We've got maybe 2 pulses left before the drive fails anyway. We've taken out 78 ships, but 220 remain. That's still enough to burn Earth to ash. Vorn is coordinating their defense, adapting to our tactics. If we don't cut off the head, this all meant nothing. There has to be another way. Find one. You have 2 minutes before we're in position. Haijin turned to the tactical display, searching for alternatives. Could they make one more hit-and-run attack? Destroy a few more ships and hope the Kravax would retreat? No. They were already angry, already committed. Vorn would never back down after losing so many vessels to one human ship. Could they disable the flagship's engines? Leave it stranded? The targeting would be too precise, too difficult with the cascade drive's area effect. Could they transmit their shield frequency, share the weapon technology with Earth's remaining forces? There were no remaining forces, only evacuation shuttles fleeing the system. She looked at Junho's scarred face, at the determination in his eyes. He had already made his decision. He had probably made it hours ago, before they even left the asteroid belt. This was always going to end one way. I can't find another option, Haijin admitted. But the crew deserves to choose. Vote on it. Junho touched the ship-wide intercom. All hands, this is the captain. You need to hear something. He explained the plan, clear and direct. Fly into Vorn's flagship. Detonate the cascade drive at point-blank range. Destroy the Kravax command structure. Everyone aboard the Indomitable would die. No escape, no rescue, no miraculous survival. I'm putting it to a vote, Junho said. This is not an order. We've already done more than anyone expected. We can still retreat, live to fight another day, or try something else. Broadcast your decision to the bridge. You have 5 minutes. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Taijin looked at the glowing blue sphere of the cascade drive. His life's work, the machine he had spent 10 years perfecting. He thought about his wife, who had died in a shuttle accident 5 years ago. She would have told him to come home, to find another way. But there was no other way, and no home to return to if Earth fell. He voted yes. Medical Officer Yuna moved through the wounded crew members in the medical bay. 23 people injured in the hull breaches, burns and broken bones and worse. Some were unconscious. Some screamed in pain despite the medication. She had sedatives ready, enough to make sure they wouldn't feel the end coming. She thought about her grandchildren on Earth, 2 little girls who drew pictures of her in crayon. If the Krevaks won, what future would those girls have? Slaves to an empire that saw humans as inferior. Disposable Dodd, she voted yes. Weapons Officer Jiwoo sat at her station, hands shaking. She was 25 years old. She had planned to serve 10 years, then leave the military and become a teacher. She wanted to get married someday, have children, grow old watching sunsets from a porch somewhere quiet. All those dreams were about to end, but she thought about the billions of people on Earth who had the same dreams. Students like she had been, teachers she had admired, families trying to build lives. If she died here, maybe they would get their chance. She voted yes. The votes came in, one by one. 200 crew members, 200 decisions. Some took the full 5 minutes, agonizing over the choice. Others answered immediately. When the count finished, Junho read the results. 198 yes. 2 abstentions. 0 no votes. The 2 who abstained were crew members unconscious in medical bay, unable to respond. Every conscious person aboard had voted to die for Earth. Junho's hands trembled as he gripped the command chair. He had led people into danger before, but never like this. Never with such certainty that none would return. Then we finish this. Minho, execute the course. Maximum thrust. Taijin, prepare the cascade drive for final detonation. Jiwoo, use our last 2 pulses to clear a path to the flagship. The Indomitable's engines burned at full power, accelerating toward Vaughn's command ship. The Krivak's fleet realized what was happening. Dreadnoughts moving to intercept. Particle beams lanced through space. Missiles filled the darkness with fire. First pulse, fire. Junho ordered. The gravitational wave caught a group of 6 dreadnoughts trying to block their path. The ships crumpled, crushed together like toys. The Indomitable flew through the expanding debris field. Supreme Legate Vaughn watched the human ship approach on his displays. His tactical officers were screaming warnings, but he understood now. This wasn't a warship. It was a missile with a crew. The humans were going to ram him, and whatever weapon they carried would detonate on impact. Move the flagship. Vaughn roared. Full engines. Get us out of here. But his ship was too large, too slow. It had been designed as a mobile command fortress, not for quick maneuvers. The engines fired, but acceleration was sluggish. The human ship was coming too fast. Deploy all remaining vessels between us and that ship. Stop them at any cost. 15 dreadnoughts moved into position, creating a wall of metal and weapons between Vaughn and the Indomitable. They opened fire simultaneously, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Second pulse, fire. Junho commanded. The last gravitational wave tore through the defensive wall. Ships were ripped apart, scattered like leaves in a storm. But it wasn't enough. 3 dreadnoughts remained, damaged but functional, their weapons still active. Particle beams punched through the Indomitable's hull. Deck 2 exploded, killing 40 crew members instantly. Fire spread through the ship. The bridge lights flickered as power systems failed. Jiwoo's console exploded in a shower of sparks, burning her hands and face. She screamed but stayed at her post. Hull integrity failing. Haijin shouted. Multiple breaches were losing atmosphere. Distance to flagship? Junho asked calmly. 5,000 kilometers and closing. 4,000. 3,000. Taijin's voice came through the failing intercom, distorted by static. Cascade Drive is ready for detonation. Just give the word, Captain. Junho opened the ship-wide channel one last time. All crew, this is your captain. It has been my honor to serve with you. Tell Earth we died buying them a future. Tell them we died free. The response came from wounded, dying, terrified crew members throughout the burning ship. For Earth, 2,000 kilometers. Vorn's flagship loomed on the view screen, massive and terrible. The Supreme Legate stared at the approaching human ship, finally understanding what fear felt like. His empire ruled 400 worlds. He commanded millions of soldiers. And he was about to die because of 200 humans who refused to surrender. 1,000 kilometers. Taijin, Junho said quietly. Do it. Chief Engineer Taijin placed his hand on the detonation control. He thought one last time about his wife, about the stars, about the machine that had consumed his life. Then he pressed the button. The Cascade Drive collapsed inward, gravitational fields compressing beyond all safety limits. The containment field shattered. Space itself began to fold, creating a temporary singularity that grew and grew and grew. 500 kilometers. Medical Officer Yuna moved through the medical bay, injecting sedatives into the wounded. They fell unconscious peacefully, spared from feeling what came next. 300 kilometers. Navigator Minho kept his hands steady on the controls, maintaining course even as the ship shook itself apart. 100 kilometers. Lieutenant. Haijin looked at Captain Junho one last time. See you on the other side, sir. Junho smiled. Save me a seat. The S Indomitable, burning and broken, carrying 200 souls who chose to die rather than surrender, crashed into Supreme Legate Vorn's flagship. And reality screamed. The gravitational singularity expanded in silence. Space cannot carry sound, so the most devastating explosion in human history made no noise. But across every wavelength, from radio to gamma radiation, the blast screamed across the solar system. Admiral Myres stood at Luna, station's observation deck, and watched reality tear itself apart. The singularity swallowed Vorn's flagship first, the massive dreadnought crumpling like paper in a fire. Then the ships closest to the blast, 97 Krivex vessels caught in the gravitational field before they could escape. Metal, crew, weapons, everything compressed into a point so small it couldn't be measured, then released in a flash of light that temporarily outshone the sun. The shockwave expanded outward. Ships at the edge of the blast radius were thrown across space, tumbling end over end with destroyed engines and shattered hulls. The Krivex formation, already damaged and scattered from the Indomitable's earlier attacks, completely fell apart. On Earth, billions of people watched screens that showed the battle. They saw the explosion, saw the enemy fleet break and run, and they understood what it cost. 200 crew members, 200 volunteers who knew they wouldn't survive. The streets filled with people crying and cheering simultaneously. Grief and joy mixed together in a way that felt wrong and right at the same time. Commander Daeyun, still at Luna Station, watched the scanner displays as the remaining Krivex ships fled into jump space. 123 dreadnoughts remained out of the original 300. They scattered in every direction, leaderless and terrified. An empire that had conquered 19 civilizations was running from one human ship sacrifice. All defense stations, stand down from combat alert, Myre ordered. Her voice was hoarse, throat tight with emotion she refused to show. Begin rescue operations for any survivors from the Indomitable. But everyone knew there would be no survivors. The scanners showed nothing where the human ship had been, just expanding debris and radiation. The Indomitable and her crew of 200 had vanished completely, destroyed in the gravitational collapse they had created. Myrae returned to her office and sat in the darkness for a long time. She had sent them to die. Junho, Haijin, Taijin, Jiwoo, Minho, Suyeon, Yuna, and 193 others whose names she had memorized. Young and old, experienced veterans and fresh recruits, all gone. She poured a glass of whiskey and raised it to the empty room. "Thank you," she whispered. "Earth stands because of you." The Galactic Council met in emergency session 3 days later. The alien species who had abandoned humanity, who had voted to recognize Kryvak's sovereignty over Earth, now scrambled to reverse their decision. They had watched the battle, seen the recordings of one ship against an armada. The Council's senior members argued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. They revoked recognition of Kryvak's control over the Sol system. They declared humanity a protected species under Council law. They offered aid, resources, technology. Too little, too late, Admiral Myrae thought when she received the transmission. Earth had stood alone when it mattered. The Kryvak's dominion, having lost nearly half its fleet including its supreme military commander, sued for peace. They offered reparations, territory, trade agreements, anything to avoid continuing the war. Earth's civilian government wanted to accept immediately, terrified of another attack, but Myrae convinced them to wait. "We negotiate from strength now, not fear. They know what we're capable of. They know we'll die fighting rather than surrender. That's worth more than any weapon system." The negotiations took 3 months. In the end, the Kryvaks agreed to stay out of human territory permanently, to never approach Earth or her colonies again. They paid reparations that would fund Earth's defense expansion for a decade. They acknowledged humanity's right to exist as a free species, all because of one ship and 200 volunteers. 1 year after the battle, Earth's orbital stations had been rebuilt. New defense platforms orbited the planet, bristling with weapons and shields. Shipyards constructed a new fleet, frigates and destroyers designed with lessons learned from the Indomitable's sacrifice. And at the largest shipyard, floating above Earth's blue curve, a new vessel was taking shape. Sleeker than the original, larger, more powerful, but built on the same principles. The Indomitable II, first of a new class of warships, each one equipped with a refined cascade drive. Stabilized and safer, but no less devastating. Commander Dayan, now promoted to Admiral after Myrae retired, stood at the commissioning ceremony. Dignitaries from across Earth attended, along with representatives from the Galactic Council. They gave speeches about sacrifice and courage and humanity's place among the stars. Politicians took credit for decisions they had opposed. Everyone wanted to be part of the story now, but Dayan's mind was elsewhere. He looked at the memorial wall recently installed at the ceremony site. 200 names carved in black marble, lit by eternal flames. Captain Junho, Lieutenant Haijin, Chief Engineer Taijin, Weapons Officer Jiwoo, Navigator Minho, Dr. Suyeon, Medical Officer Yuna, 193 others. He had known some of them. Junho had taught him tactics at the academy, back when they were both young and stupid. Haijin had been his classmate, always asking impossible questions that made instructors angry. Taijin had helped him repair his first ship's engine, showing patience with a confused ensign who couldn't tell a plasma coil from a power relay. Now they were legends. Statues stood in their honor in every major city. Schools bore their names. Children played games pretending to be the crew of the Indomitable, fighting impossible odds. The story had grown in the telling, becoming myth, but Dayan remembered them as people. Flawed, scared, human. Junho's temper, Haijin's doubt, Taijin's obsession with his engine. They hadn't been perfect heroes from a story. They'd been ordinary people who chose to do something extraordinary. The ceremony ended with the new Indomitable launching. Its engines flared blue-white, and the ship rose from the construction dock, ascending into Earth's orbit. Crowds cheered. Cameras recorded everything. Another vessel joined it, the ESS Junho, named after the captain who had saved them all. More would follow, an entire fleet named after the crew who gave their lives. Daeun saluted the memorial wall, military precision despite the tears on his face. Around him, other officers did the same. Civilians placed flowers at the base of the wall, adding to the thousands already there. That night, Daeun sat in his new office, looking at reports and ship manifests and supply requests. The work of defense never ended. Earth was safe for now, but the galaxy was huge and dangerous. Other threats would come eventually. The Kryvax would rebuild. New empires would rise. But now humanity had something they didn't have before. Proof that they could win. Proof that courage and sacrifice and refusing to surrender meant something. The galaxy had learned a lesson when they scoffed at Earth's defenses. Never underestimate someone fighting for their home. Never assume size and power guarantee victory. And never, ever back a human into a corner and expect them to submit quietly. The Indomitable was gone, destroyed in a flash of light and gravity. But its legacy remained. 200 people who looked at impossible odds and said, "We can do this." 200 people who traded their lives for billions of others. 200 people who proved that sometimes one ship is enough. Daeun raised a glass of whiskey to the stars beyond his window. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between worlds, debris from the original Indomitable still floated. Fragments of hull plating, pieces of the ship that had changed everything. "You did it," he said quietly to the empty office. To the ghosts of the crew who would never know how completely their sacrifice had mattered. Earth stands. We're building a fleet. We're ready for whatever comes next. Because you showed us how. The new Indomitable passed overhead, its running lights bright against the black. Tomorrow, it would begin patrol routes around Earth's defensive perimeter. The day after, the ES Junho would join it. Week by week, month by month, the fleet would grow. The Kryvax had scoffed at Earth's defenses. One human warship proved them catastrophically wrong. And now Earth would make sure no one ever made that mistake again. The stars shone cold and distant, but Earth's lights burned warm and bright. Humanity had paid a terrible price for survival. But they had survived. And they would remember 200 names on black marble. 200 lights that would never go out. 200 reasons why Earth would stand forever. No matter what the galaxy threw at them, the story of the Indomitable would be told for generations. And every time someone asked if humanity could stand against impossible odds, the answer would always be the same. They already did.